What if Shedeur Sanders never had a real shot? Not because he couldn't play, not because he wasn't NFL ready, but because of who raised him. It sounds crazy until you start connecting the dots. Here's a quarterback who dominated at 2 different college programs, broke records, led locker rooms, survived pressure most 21-year-olds would fold under. And still, when he showed up at Browns camp, he was benched before he even took a real snap. Why? That's what fans kept asking, quietly, then angrily, and eventually loudly, because the silence around Shedeur's opportunity in Cleveland spoke volumes. No first-team reps, no buzz from camp insiders, no footage, no hype, just quiet dismissal. And then, just as the media tried to sweep it away, a former Browns first-rounder broke the code of silence and said what everyone had been thinking. Shedeur was doomed from that one sentence changed everything. It cracked open the PR wall and exposed something dirtier than bad QB play. This wasn't about completions or footwork. This was about legacy bias, media discomfort, and front office politics. And at the center of it all, a kid who did everything right, but wore the wrong last name. So here's the real question. Was the NFL ever planning to give Shedeur Sanders an honest shot, or was he just another box ticked? A high-visibility name brought in for headlines, then buried quietly before anyone asked too many questions. Let's break it down, because what just happened in Cleveland doesn't just affect one player. It exposes a problem the league doesn't want to admit still exists. Shedeur Sanders wasn't just overlooked in the NFL draft. He was deliberately passed over, round after, despite one of the most impressive college resumes among quarterbacks in his class. Despite the leadership, the clutch plays, the poise under pressure, the league's message was simple. Thanks, but no thanks. And if the draft wasn't clear enough, the Cleveland Browns made it louder. They passed on Shedeur early and instead drafted Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round. No disrespect to Gabriel, but let's be honest, Shedeur's college production was superior in nearly every category. So why was Shedeur still on the board? Why was his name skipped quietly while his competitors were being drafted and celebrated? Simple. The league didn't just question his fit, they questioned his presence. GMs, scouts, and front offices didn't want the pressure that comes with the Sanders name. They didn't want the media circus, the expectations, or the distraction of a player who already had a brand, a voice, and the confidence to use both. And their way of keeping control? Just don't pick him. That's the quiet tactic NFL decision-makers use when they don't want to deal with someone. They fade them out. No statements, no drama, just a silent message to every other team. Let someone else deal with it. But Shedeur wasn't some long-shot project. He was a proven winner. And by the time the Browns finally took him, the 5th round, the writing was already on the wall. They didn't draft him to lead. They drafted him to contain. For weeks, fans were whispering what they didn't want to say out loud. Did Shedeur get buried because he's Deion's son? Not because of talent, but because of perception. Then came Phil Taylor, a former first-round draft pick, a respected voice, and someone who actually played for the Cleveland Browns. In one podcast clip, short, raw, and instantly viral, Phil said the quiet part out loud. He was doomed from the start because of who his father is. That one sentence shattered the coincidence theory. Phil wasn't speculating. He was connecting dots, saying what players and coaches behind the scenes knew, but never dared to confirm. That Shedeur was judged not on arm strength, not on decision-making, but on something he couldn't control, his last name. Taylor said the league never looked at Deion Sanders as an ally. Too flashy, too loud, too independent. And Shedeur? He got caught in the shadow of a legacy the NFL wasn't ready to embrace, especially not from a family that doesn't play by the old rules. This wasn't just locker room talk. It was confirmation from inside the machine. And once a former NFL insider confirms the bias, let's be real, Deion Sanders is more than just a football legend. He's a brand, a culture shifter, a media force, and one of the most outspoken voices in the sport. He changed the way players walk into rooms. From Florida State to the NFL to now coaching on the national stage, Primetime made confidence cool and refused to play humble just to make people comfortable. That's exactly why execs held it against him. Phil Taylor hinted at it, but insiders have whispered it for years. NFL ownership circles never fully embraced Deion. Too flashy, too loud, too independent, too uncontrollable. And when you combine that kind of energy with his son, a polished, confident, media-ready quarterback who didn't need their platform to become relevant, suddenly, teams weren't evaluating Shedeur Sanders the player. They were evaluating what came with him. The name, the eyes, the cameras, the pressure, and for conservative, traditional NFL front offices, that's a red flag. Not because Shedeur lacks talent, but because he can't be molded like a normal rookie. So instead of embracing the opportunity, they played it safe. They buried him under the assumption that anyone tied to Deion must come with distractions. They called it protecting the locker room. But what they were really protecting was control. And Shedeur, he walked in with too much of it. He didn't ask for permission, didn't wait his turn. He brought a spotlight they couldn't control. And instead of rising to meet it, they hid. Publicly, the Browns said all the right things. We're evaluating all 4 quarterbacks. It's an open competition. Best player will rise to the top. But behind the scenes, that line started to feel more because while other QBs were splitting first-team reps, rotating through real game scenarios, Shedeur Sanders wasn't even getting looks. Not meaningful ones. Not situational drives. Not field time with core receivers. Early reports? Silent. Training camp buzz? Nearly non-existent. Media access? Tightly controlled, with almost no substantial footage of Shedeur in action. And for fans paying attention, it quickly became obvious. This competition wasn't real. It wasn't that Shedeur was being outplayed, it was that he was being boxed out, like the decision had been made before the first snap ever left his hands. If this was truly an open battle, where were the updates? Where were the highlights, the interviews, the quotes? Why was a player with elite college production getting the least exposure in a camp built for evaluation? It felt staged. Worse, it felt intentional. Not a meritocracy, but a managed narrative. One where Shedeur existed on the roster sheet, but not in the franchise's actual plans. And that silence? It was louder than anyone wanted to admit. Because if you're not even giving a guy live reps, how can anyone claim he had a fair shot? They didn't bench him, they buried him. Let's talk about the bias that no one in the NFL wants to admit. Because while Shedeur Sanders is being painted as cocky, overhyped, and distracting, another young quarterback, Arch Manning, is being praised as polished, marketable, and the future. Let's break this down. Arch Manning, nephew of Eli and Peyton, carries the most iconic last name in quarterback history. His college production? Minimal. His freshman season? Mostly spent on the bench, with underwhelming flashes when he did see the field. Scouts quietly admitted he's not ready, and yet, reports emerge that the Browns are interested in Arch Manning, despite having Shedeur already in the building, despite Shedeur being more experienced, more productive, and more proven under pressure. So what gives? Here's the truth. Arch Manning fits the mold. He's soft-spoken, polished, marketable in the safe way. He represents the machine. He doesn't challenge it. Shedeur, on the other hand, he came in with swagger, a bland, and a built-in following, the same self-assurance that helped him lead Jackson State and produce at Colorado. In the league's eyes, it's reframed as arrogance. So let's call it what it is. This isn't about talent, it's about narrative. Because when Shedeur shows confidence, it's labeled cocky. When art shows confidence, it's called leadership. Two last names, two legacies. One is accepted, the other is questioned, even when the tape tells the opposite story. And that double standard, it's been sitting in plain sight all along. At first, it felt like the Browns had quietly pushed Shedeur into the background and moved on. But then the internet did what it always does. Clips resurfaced. College tape got reposted. Beat writers' practice notes were dissected line by line. Fans started asking the questions the team wouldn't answer. Where were the first-team reps? Why was there so little footage? If this was a true competition, why did it look like a closed set? Phil Taylor's comments poured gasoline on that spark. Overnight, hashtags trended, podcasts reacted, and forums lit up. People who'd actually watched Shedeur at Jackson State and Colorado brought receipts. Accurate poise behind a collapsing line. The narrative of overhyped name started to crack. Reports suggest even neutral analysts began rechecking their grades. Not because Shedeur suddenly became a different player, but because the silence around him felt manufactured. You could feel the conversation shifting from, "Is he good enough?" to, "Was he ever given the chance to prove it?" And through all of it, Shedeur stayed quiet. No reactive tweets, no subtweets, no press jabs. He just kept working. That restraint changed the tone. It made people reframe him, not as a distraction, but as a pro who refused to feed the noise. For a lot of fans, that was the moment the benefit of the doubt flipped. Meanwhile, another pattern emerged. While Shedeur vanished from team content, other rookies with thinner resumes got stage spotlights and optimistic blurbs. Fans aren't blind, they notice what they're shown. That's when the question got bigger than the Browns. If a top-producing college QB with a clean profile can be minimized this easily, how often does this happen without anyone saying a word? Because once the public starts connecting dots, the focus moves past depth charts to something far more uncomfortable. Who's shaping the story, and why? Next, we dig into exactly that. How narrative control quietly outranks talent when a player walks in with his own spotlight. Here's the uncomfortable truth. In today's NFL, narrative can bench you faster than a bad throw. Teams don't just evaluate quarterbacks on tape. They evaluate risk, PR risk, control risk. And when a rookie arrives with his own audience, message, and momentum, front offices start asking a different question. Can we shape this, or will he? He showed up with a platform, a brand voice, and a following bigger than most rookies ever touch. In a league built on hierarchy, that flips the power dynamic, and the labels shift right with it. Confidence becomes cocky, presence becomes distraction, family legacy becomes baggage, silence becomes aloof. Meanwhile, those same traits are called poise, polish, and marketable legacy when they come in a safer, more traditional package. That's not football analysis. That's story management. Remember, most franchises want rookies to be blank canvases, moldable, quiet, controllable. Shedeur isn't a blank canvas. He's a finished headline. That threatens gatekeepers who prefer to decide when and how a player matters. The media machine helps it along. Limited reps get reframed as no separation. Lack of footage becomes nothing to see. Safer narratives get airtime. Bolder ones get iced out. It's not a conspiracy, it's incentives. If a player owns his spotlight, the old system loses leverage. Phil Taylor's comment pierced that bubble. He didn't sell drama. He pointed at the mechanism. Perception steering opportunity. And here's the cost of that mechanism. Fans get curated truth instead of full evaluation. Coaches miss the chance to test real upside. Players lose windows they'll never get back. If narrative can outrank talent for one quarterback, it can do it for any. If this was only about one quarterback, it would be noise. But it isn't. It's about how teams make decisions that affect wins, losses, and your Sundays. When narrative outranks talent, everyone loses. Coaches miss upside hiding in plain sight. Last name. What other value is your team leaving on the table? How many future starters never get real reps because someone in a meeting decided their story was too loud? That's not hypothetical. It's a market inefficiency, the kind that winning teams exploit and stagnant teams repeat. There's another layer. Moments like this send a message to the next wave of players. Stay small. Don't build a brand. Don't stand out. That doesn't create better quarterbacks. It creates quieter ones. And quiet doesn't convert 3rd and 8. Fans should demand transparency around evaluation. Who's getting first-team reps and why? What are the criteria in camp beyond buzzwords like poise and fit? If it's truly an open competition, show it. Because when footage disappears and updates get vague, it's not hard to guess what's being protected. If a top-producing college QB can be minimized because he arrives with his own platform, and here's the risk for Cleveland. If Shedeur gets an honest shot elsewhere and pops, the narrative flips overnight. Suddenly, this wasn't a distraction. It was a misread, a costly one. Winning franchises use discomfort as a filter, not a wall. They bring in talent, pressure test the room, and let the field decide. That's how you build a locker room that can handle January. So yes, this matters. To your team's cap, to your draft strategy, to the kind of football you get to watch. Bias doesn't just bench a player, it benches possibilities. Which brings us back to Shedeur. He didn't chase a headline. He chose patience. And when patience meets opportunity, the NFL has a habit of acting surprised. Strip away the noise and you're not because he couldn't play, but because the story around him felt too big for the people in charge. Phil Taylor said the quiet part out loud. Reports echoed what fans sensed. And the pattern that followed? Limited reps, limited footage, limited chances didn't look like evaluation. It looked like containment. That matters. Because when perception outranks performance, teams don't just miss on players. They miss on windows, culture, wins. Here's what Shedeur Sanders actually showed through all of it. Restraint, poise, and a refusal to perform for the court of public opinion. No clapbacks, no theatrics, just work. That kind of patience is dangerous for opponents and for any franchise that tried to reduce him to a surname. Was this about football? Partly. But it was also about control. The NFL is most comfortable when rookies arrive blank. Shedeur isn't blank. He's already built. And that scares rooms that prefer to script the spotlight rather than share it. Rumors suggest other teams are watching closely. If one of them hands him a real competition, clear reps, clear criteria, clear tape, the narrative won't need defending. It will take care of itself. So ask yourself, if a player with production, leadership, and maturity can be minimized this easily, how often does it happen where no one is paying attention? How many misses were never misses, just misreads? In a league that claims merit, the fix is simple. Let the field decide, not the brand deck, not the comment section, not the comfort level of a room that fears a last name. Shedeur's story isn't over. It hasn't even started. And when the right door opens, the quiet he kept will be the loudest thing about him. Your move, NFL. Drop your take below. Did the Browns protect a narrative or pass on a quarterback who's built for moments bigger than this?